What's up, investors? Here's the Russian dude. There's something uniquely horrifying about a military so dysfunctional it keeps destroying its own cities. One accident, that's more or less understandable. Two accidents, extremely rare, so there might be better a very good reason for this. But when friendly fire keeps happening against their own civilians almost on a weekly basis, there are no longer valid excuses. It's just blatant incompetence and negligence. What makes Russia's current war effort even more grotesque is how casual it all became. Like, oops, we dropped another bomb on Belgorod. Our bad, sorry boys. Instead of mouse outrage, there is just a quiet shrug, a half-muted excuse and a state machine that spins the whole thing like a bad traffic accident. As long as they can blame someone else, anyone other than themselves, it is business as usual. In the past, for example, the acknowledgement by the officials that a friendly fire incident took place was equal to discrediting the Russian army. Now, even the highest authorities, like the governor of Belgorod Region, Vyacheslav Gladkov, they confirm from time to time that an unfortunate event, quote-unquote, took place. And nobody cares anymore. But what if I told you that last week we witnessed not just one, but two textbook examples of this surreal downward spiral? First, an unarmed Russian bomb slams into a civilian highway in Belgorod region. And second, a group of jittery Russian soldiers lights up their own helicopter in Naro-Fominsk like it was a target in a carnival shooting gallery. And in the end of today's video, we will also talk about Steve Witkoff, the US envoy, doing his best impression of a peace negotiator by repeating back Putin's old demands as if they were some kind of a breaking news. So yeah, let's begin with Belgorod, so welcome back, where the most dangerous thing you can do these days is to stay home. This time a Russian fighter jet dropped a FAB-500 bomb just west of the city, near the village of Novaya Glinka. What's even more absurd is that it landed in a heavy traffic area and miraculously did not explode. According to Russians it was unarmed, but it was still enough to cause massive havoc. Let's talk specifics. This device, an unguided 500 kilograms Soviet-era monster, crashed through the pavement like a jackhammer. No detonation, no nothing, but the impact alone was strong enough to injure a driver who just happened to be on the road at the wrong time at the wrong place because of the concrete literally flying in all sides in all directions like shrapnel. A few more meters to the other side and we will be looking at dozens of eliminated civilians, unfortunately once again. The reaction of the Russian media? Non-existent. Even now, if you try to Google articles in Russian, it will not give you anything meaningful. Since when did this kind of thing become so frequent? People barely care anymore. The reason we even found out about this incident in the first place, because the governor of Belgorod Region, Vyacheslav Gladkov, mentioned this in his Telegram channel, that there was some kind of loud noises on the highway which resulted in a, like crater. Somehow it appeared out of nowhere. He did confirm it as well, that at least one civilian was injured, and the reason why it was an obviously friendly fire from the Russian side is because the way Gladkov presented the news. Because usually, if there is a slight chance that Ukrainians were behind an attack, Gladkov, just like the rest of Russian propaganda, immediately blames Ukraine. They don't even think. It happens even before the official investigation takes place. But when they know that it was either deliberate or accidental attack from the Russian military itself, then they just state that the incident took place as just a matter of fact. This is what happened, this is where it happened, this is how many casualties, if any. And that's precisely the way the governor of Belgorod region told us about this news on the heavy traffic area highway incident. If you think about it, this is not just a freak accident, it is a part of a pattern at this point. The Russian aerospace forces have been increasingly using these glide bombs, often fitted with retrofitted UMPK kits, because they're cheap, abundant, and launch from relatively safe distances. The downside? Well, they are incredibly inaccurate and prone to technical failure. Add poor maintenance, exhausted personnel, and ambiguous targeting protocols to the mix, and suddenly Belgorod as a region as a whole becomes a testing ground for incompetence. But since when any of the Russian authorities cared? That is a good question. In case something happened, just ignore it, and move along like nothing ever happened. So instead of accountability, what do we have? The same repetitive protocol. Russia's investigative committee launched a criminal investigation, probe. It blames Ukraine and promises to get to the bottom of it. Spoiler alert, well, there is nothing to get to the bottom of. The bottom is in plain sight, and it is very much Russian. And once again, let's be clear, these incidents are not the anomalies. Since the beginning of 2023, at least 4 separate friendly fire events have rocked Belgorod alone. Just last December, a Russian jet dropped 2 armed devices in the city, injuring over 25 civilians and shattering windows in kilometers away. Another incident involved helicopter, which also happened in Naro-Fominsk, 50 kilometers away from Moscow just a few weeks ago. And guys, we will talk about it in more details just in a few minutes. But hey, as long as no one in the Kremlin is concerned, it's fine, right? I mean, imagine if something similar happens in the United States. What if someone during test flight accidentally drops something on San Antonio, Texas? Will this make nationwide news, or will the government just quietly sweep the story under the rug? You guys tell me. Now let's shift our attention to Naro-Fominsk, a quiet town outside of Moscow that became the stage for Russia's latest military fiasco. Late at night, local air defense crews spotted a flying object. It was a helicopter, but that did not matter. Nobody asked questions, no one checked. They opened fire. The result? A barrage of small arms and anti-aircraft fire aimed directly at one of their own. The aircraft, believed to be linked to Russian law enforcement or potentially even the FSB, former KGB, was attacked from literally every angle. Tracer rounds illuminated the sky. If not for pure dumb luck, the crew would have been vaporized by their own comrades. Here is what makes it even more ridiculous. Russia's military knows Ukraine does not use helicopters in cross-border attacks. It is logistically impossible. Ukrainian choppers simply do not have the range or stealth to reach the Moscow region unnoticed. And yet, someone saw rotors and said, "Fire away, guys! Shoot it! Comrades, pay attention!" Local defenses, often manned by poorly trained or reservist troops, are operating under paranoia and chaos. There is no identification friend or foe IFF system in place. No digital cross-checking, just raw instincts and a hotline to superior officer who may or may not pick up the phone. I can almost clearly see it. A low-ranking sergeant calls his captain at 4 a.m. in the morning and asks in trembling voice, "Sir, we have a helicopter, sir. What do we do, sir?" And the captain, half asleep, half awake, just mumbles, "Sure, no. It's 4 a.m. for God's sake. Let me sleep and stop bothering me with this stupid nonsense." Just hands up the phone. Later, Defense Express, the Ukrainian outlet that analyzed the incident, noted that a helicopter had visible tip lights, a standard aviation feature used for safety and visibility. But nighttime panic overrides logic, especially in a military stretched thin by overdeployment, fatigue, and lack of oversight. But let's go even deeper. Naro-Fominsk is not just some random village. It is home to several key military installations, including the 4th Guards Kantelemaevskaya Tank Division and the Frunze Military Academy's training center. These are not amateurs, these are supposedly elite forces, and even they cannot distinguish a domestic flight from a threat. Is this an isolated failure? Once again, not even close. In late 2023, Russian troops intercepted a civil cargo plane near Grozny, Chechnya, hundreds of kilometers away from the borders, after mistaking it for a Ukrainian drone. Civil aviation is becoming collateral damage for a military that shoots shadows before it even can see a face. What do you do when your own countrymen keep accidentally bombing themselves and lighting up friendly aircrafts? If you're the regime of Putin, It is obvious you simply lie. Telegram channels quickly scrambled to frame the Naro-Fominsk incident as a Ukrainian helicopter-style drone, allegedly built by some obscure defense startup called Ramzai. The model in question, RZ-500, does not even appear in official Ukrainian defense briefings. It is non-existent anywhere. It was simply created by the Russian propaganda out of thin air. Just like me, I don't know, for example, proclaiming right now that Afghanistan recently launched a space shuttle called FU-Put-in V6 in a mission to reach Mars before Elon Musk. Source? Trust me, bro. But that's never stopped Russian propaganda before. If it looks like a drone, spins like a rotor, and explodes like an accident, it must be NATO's fault, right? The sad part, many people believe this. Russia's information environment is so poisoned that absurdity is normalized. The idea of a drone helicopter somehow infiltrating the airspace around Moscow sounds crazy, but not as crazy as admitting you almost shot down your own FSB helicopter. What's worse, institutional decay is accelerating. Take a step back and look at the trend. Bombs routinely dropped in civilian zones, friendly fire incidents becoming regular, zero accountability from command. Even Sergei Shoigu, who supposedly presides behind the scenes over this madness, has not lifted a finger to impose a reform. Why would he? His job is not to win a war, it is to survive a power structure built on silence and neglect. This decay is not confined to the battlefield, it is spreading through every ministry, agency and regional government office like a virus. No one wants to take responsibility. Everyone is looking for the next person to blame. And as the war drags on, the consequences are becoming impossible to hide. It is as simple as that. Alright, let's leave the battlefield and fly over to Moscow, where Steve Witkoff, Trump's real estate buddy who became American peace envoy, tried to bring peace to this war. He met with Putin for an astonishing 5 hours and came out of sounding like he just discovered fire. According to him, the path to peace is simple. Pay attention, guys. Ukraine should recognize Russia's annexation of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporozhye and Kherson. You know, the territories that are still actively contested, kinda, where shelling is not stopped and where the front lines shift daily. But for him it's not a big deal. Let's just give them to Russia. And then there will be peace, according to Putin, if you trust him. What Witkoff does not mention is how utterly divorced this proposal is from reality. Ukraine's parliament passed a law explicitly forbidding negotiations with Putin until all occupied territories are liberated. The Republic's support for peace without territorial concessions sits near zero. They have lost tens of thousands of soldiers defending these regions. There is no scenario where Zelensky agrees to this and stays in office. Looks like somebody in Trump's administration has to complete a crash course about the events in the Eastern Europe over the last 3 years. And then there is the pipeline twist. As reported by Reuters, part of this deal allegedly involves handing control of a key Ukrainian gas pipeline over to the United States. Yeah, and the very same that Gazprom, Russian company, used to pump gas into Europe. The idea? America gets to manage the flow, approve deliveries and keep the profits. Russia gets to resume sales. Europe gets its gas. Everyone wins except, of course, Ukraine, which loses sovereignty, energy leverage and, well, dignity. Witkoff called this deal compelling. We call it economic devastation dressed up as peace building. And it seems like exactly the kind of opportunism that turns wars into business ventures. Trump's team is trying to broker not a ceasefire, but a real estate deal, it seems like. And Ukraine? It's just the land beneath the property for them, it seems. But luckily, the incompetence of the Russian military itself still gives Ukraine pretty good chances to come out of all of this on the very top. Well, there you have it, guys. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below, for example Patreon, where these episodes come out in early access, and then there is also additional extra chapter for ridiculous Russian propaganda. Thanks so much for watching, see you tomorrow.
All they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We Do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.